Hey, thank you for happening upon this video. My name is Zalmi Berkowitz, and I am the host of the On Composition Workshop. Not sure if host is a correct term here. Anyways, today I will be talking about the need. Not need. I'm going to be talking about why it would be cool to have a circle sensor. Don't like the word cool either. Why a circle sensor would be great. Now, I know this is not a topic that comes up often, and no one's going to find this video by searching for a circle sensor because no one wants a circle sensor. But here is my reasons why a circle sensor would be awesome. So first of all, let's make my way to my screen over here. Most images we see nowadays are shot and shown in the 2x3 format, also known as 4x6, because do the math. And the reason most images are shown in this format is because that's what cameras give us. Meaning, since cameras record images in a 2x3 format, therefore we create images in a 2x3 format. Totally makes sense. Before 35mm photography was common, most images were not in 2x3 format. They were in square format, or 6x7, or 4x5. I'd say probably 4x5 would be the most common. Most people shot in the format that they wanted to deliver, I guess. And the most common was 4x5. If you look at classic art, I'd say 4x5 is probably the most common. Anyways, nowadays, since cameras are made to copy 35mm cameras, which were made to be able to hold film with sprockets to move the film along, and somehow they came along this idea that 2x3 would just work best. There was no gathering of artists who got together and decided that 2x3 is the best format to share the world or to present art. And it's a little bit sad to me. It's sad to me that we do what our camera overlords tell us to do. They give us these cameras in 2x3. We shoot in 2x3 because that's what we see through the camera. It's very hard to shoot any other way. And in fact, most of us, or many of us, might think that, oh, I love the 2x3 format. This is the only one that makes sense for me. But that's kind of all we're given, you know? Though there are some cameras that are not exactly 2x3, like Micro Four Thirds, I think, are 4x3, and iPhone's 4x3, but it's very similar to 2x3. Anyways, moving my chair. I'm not sure why. So again, back to my screen over here. We look through 2x3, we shoot 2x3. However, the lens doesn't shoot in 2x3. That's the sensor size. Now, just for clarification's sake, a sensor is, I'm not sure why this is exactly, but it's 23.9 by 35 millimeters. I don't know why they couldn't just gone to 24, like just go for it, but there's probably a good reason. Probably not. There's a reason. Probably not a good one. Anyways, so the lens delivers a circular image, and the sensor only covers a portion of that circular image. So with this circle here, that beautiful yellow circle is the entire coverage of a lens called a lens circle. Now, look at my notes here to make sure I'm getting everything over here. Okay, just the reason we all shoot in 2x3, just gonna harp on this a little bit, is because that's what the cameras give us. And it's very hard to see in a different way. Meaning when you're looking through a 2x3 window, which is basically how all cameras are now, it's very hard to see a square world. Now, some cameras, especially more modern ones, allow us to shoot natively in square, meaning they only show you a square if you want to. And that's great. But a lot of us, we're very averse to doing that. Probably just because we're used to shooting in 2x3, and like we get these expensive cameras with full frame. We want to like really get a lot of that megapixels in there, and we don't want to like massively crop that. A square crop would be losing a full third of the frame, right? So you'd be going to, let's say, 36 megapixels to 24. That's a big drop. So we kind of want to maximize those megapixels, and especially with film, where 35 millimeter film doesn't have as much sheer resolution as modern sensors do. Now, this is probably arguable, but whatever. So people didn't really want to crop to squares that much. But now I feel like we need to get over that. Now, it used to be, before digital, there were hundreds of cameras and hundreds of camera companies, and they weren't all the same. Because in order to make a camera back then, all you needed is a light-proof box and a lens. And the most complicated part, which is the sensor, is the film, which you don't have to make, you could just buy. So there are hundreds of camera companies making wacky cameras. You had square cameras and 6x7 and 6x8s and cameras you look down and twin lenses where everything is reversed. And each different camera, especially if they're a different ratio, lets you see the world differently. So for example, when you're looking down at a square where everything is reversed, you're going to compose differently. Not just because of the square, though that's part of it. It's just a different way of seeing the world. Am I going to include that? And the same if you're looking through, a 6x6. Let's see, the Mamiya 6 was a 6x6, is a 6x6 rangefinder. You're looking through a clear window, kind of, and you're going to compose differently if you do that. And each system I'm going to check what's going on out there. Okay, I'm back. And using each camera system really allows you to get to learn that way of seeing. Now, even if your camera allows you to shoot in different formats, let's say using a GFX and you're shooting in square, it works. But since it's so easy to switch around, like, oh, today I'll shoot square, tomorrow I'll shoot X-Pan. X-Pan is 24 by 65. It's harder to learn a specific way of shooting. Like, let's say you buy, Rolleiflex. You're going to use that Rolleiflex for a while, and you're really going to learn how to shoot it and how it works and its quirks, where it works well, where it doesn't work well. And with digital, this is a problem or a challenge, I should say, with digital in general, is there are so many options and ways of doing things that it's really hard to really get to learn why you'd want to shoot a specific way and how to shoot that specific way. And this is one of the reasons I highly suggest shooting film, not only because I think it might be better in certain ways, like visually, but just the way it forces you to learn different ways of shooting, and it allows you to get used to shooting in square or 6x7 or whatever. It really opens up your eyes and expands your visual horizons. Not that square is better necessarily, but not that 2x3 is better. And just the idea that we're all shooting in 2x3 just because that's what the camera manufacturers gives us kind of grates on me a bit. It's like we're not maximizing our artistic potential. Does that make sense? It better make sense. So here is, now a circle sensor wouldn't even help those problems, but it would help in certain ways. So right now, I'm just going to quickly compare it to a square, because a square is the most different from a rectangle. If you're going to shoot a square, right? You're going to be cropping off, again, 1/6 from that side and 1/6 from that side. You're going to get a much smaller image. But the actual image circle from the lens gives you much more space for a square. And theoretically, if you had a circle sensor, meaning you'd be capturing the entire image circle, the square will be that big. I'm going to take out the 2x3 here. So we're going from this big to that big. And although it doesn't look that much of a difference here, it's actually 62% larger. Yes, I did the math. Well, I tried to do the math. I wrote it down here. Move over. And yeah, so a normal square, meaning if you're shooting within a normal camera now, this sensor that we're gonna be using in this scenario is exactly 3500 by 2400, right? Just to make it easy, meaning 10 pixels per millimeter, 100 pixels per millimeter. So a normal square would be 2400 by 2400, but if you could use the full circle, you'd be shooting at 3057 by 3057, which is 62% larger. The difference between 24 megapixels and 38 megapixels. And you'd actually have more usage than a 2x3. I mean, you'd be using more of the sensor. And that's a big difference. Yeah, that's a big difference. And even, let's say 8x10. Let's say you wanted to shoot an 8x10, right? So back to our 2x3 sensor. Here, 8x10, you'd be cropping. Not as much, but you're cropping on the sides. But if you could use the entire sensor, you'd be here, which is larger. Not massively so in this case, but enough to make a difference. And now there's a few reasons why this would make a difference. First of all, you'd have more megapixels, which is nice. You know, that's one of the big reasons we're getting these cameras, is for the sheer megapixels. We also have bigger sensor, meaning we're having an image that's using more of the sensor. So any advantage that larger sensors would have, whether it's better ISO performance, shallower depth of field with the same lenses, and more interesting bokeh. A lot of times the bokeh on the edges of the circle are more interesting, which is why certain... Am I going to explain this well? Probably not. Let's say, for example, you have a 50 millimeter lens on a 6x6 camera. So since it's a square, meaning it's maximizing the potential of the circle to an extent, it actually has better bokeh on the edges than when you need to have an even wider lens and then crop it in. That's also because longer lenses have better bokeh. So more interesting bokeh, more resolution, less depth of field, which is often what we want. Whatever marketing gobbledygook that medium format manufacturers throw at you, which is probably some of them are true, like better, gradations, is that the word? Better dynamic range, maybe a little bit. But anyways, all that would go to this. Another major point here is that you'd never have to turn over your camera. And this is a big one. Well, not turn over completely, but turn on the side. You'd never have to shoot in vertical. Because since you're shooting a circle, you could just push a button, theoretically, and you'd be shooting in vertical, but without turning the camera. So not only would this be easier because you don't have to turn your camera, but I know for a lot of us this is true. For some reason, when we turn the camera, we don't compose as well. And we have a hard time holding it straight. I don't know why. Even when I'm like, okay, make sure it's straight, it's still not straight. When it's horizontal, I am fine. Turn over the camera, I turn into a lesser version of myself. That's actually a big deal. And in a weird way, you'd also be gaining megapixels and coverage because since our vertical compositions aren't as good, we often leave space, or we should leave space, and then we have to crop in and rotate. So we'd be gaining the size megapixels, but also our weird inability to shoot in vertical. Yeah, and that's the main reasons why a circle sensor would be awesome. Now, this is probably not going to happen because it might be more. I mean, it's obviously more expensive to make a bigger sensor, and yeah, camera manufacturers just don't care. I feel like they don't care to make more interesting or better cameras. I mean, they need to compete. Whatever. I don't know. Now, obviously, you'd need a slightly bigger camera because you need a bigger viewfinder so you could, so you're not just cropping in, since you'd have to, have a circle. You need bigger. But honestly, cameras should have bigger viewfinders anyways. I don't know why they don't. They should be like tacking on a few $100 and like having massive viewfinders. Why don't they? It's not like we're dealing with mirrors here, like a DSLR, where you're actually getting a mirror of the exact size, and therefore it's you can't just make a bigger viewfinder. But with digital, you could make it massive. Just go for it. Make it massive. While I'm complaining about cameras here, when you're manually focusing a lens on a Sony, why can't it find the eye automatically? Do the same eye focus thing. So instead of having to move that dot all the way around so you could find the eye, turn it, and it could just automatically latch onto the eye. And they should have that split picture thing that Fuji does. Like, you could see the full frame and a close-up of the eye, or wherever else you want to. What other problems do I have with Sony? I don't know. I'm actually pretty happy with them. They're boring cameras, but they do a good job. And I think that's it. Look at my notes over here. Yeah. My main point is that I wish more people would shoot in other ratios. Like, I love squares. I think they're awesome. I think they're easier. People are like, I don't know how to shoot in square. It's so much harder. It's not harder. It's just you don't have practice doing it. I shot medium format cameras for years, square medium format cameras for years, and I learned to love the square. I'm not trying to say well, I shoot medium format cameras. I'm saying it's just something you have to practice. And unfortunately, even a circle sensor might not do that. I think it would be easier to shoot in square that way, because we are not like, I'm constantly chopping off a lot of my image. We'd be like gaining actual space. But you have to do it for a few months. Like, okay, I'm just going to shoot in square for a few months. But the problem is that, again, this is a digital issue, is that since you'd always be capturing the full circle, you could always choose you'd always be like, I wonder what's in the rest of the frame. And then you'd be changing it later. And with film, it's just you get what you get. Same with editing. Even if you like editing your images to look like film, which is not what you need to do. There's no commandment that thou'st images shall look like film. But it's a good starting point. And there's always wait, you could always more contrast, less contrast, different color, and it's hard to pinpoint a way of shooting. Whereas with film, you'd be throw in whatever film you got, and whatever you get back from the lab, you go with, and you're good. And it's just easier. Anyways, thanks for watching. Feel free to check out my website on composition.com, and it's a workshop on composition where we talk about different ratios and all other things that pertain to composition. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.